How do you explain a feeling when nothing has technically happened yet? If you're new here, welcome. Stories on this channel don't start with shouting or explosions. They start with moments like this. The quiet ones. The kind that make your stomach tighten before your brain catches up. And this one began the day a house stopped feeling like mine before anyone said it out loud. I came home late that afternoon, later than usual, groceries cutting into my fingers. First thing I noticed was the hook by the door, empty. The spare key was always there. Always. I stood longer than necessary staring at the bare screw in the wall like it might explain itself. Inside, there were shoes by the door, not hers. Too big. Worn at the heel. Men's shoes. I smelled it before I heard anything cologne. Sharp. Not something I'd ever buy. It hung in the hallway like someone had been there long enough to get comfortable. From the kitchen, my daughter spoke without turning around. "Oh, Ethan's staying here for a bit." That was it. No pause. No checking my face. No question mark. Just information delivered the same way you'd mention the weather. I told myself I was overreacting. I'd done this before, let her move back in when things fell apart. Breakups, job gaps, life stuff. That's what parents do, right? You don't keep score. You don't make it weird. I set the groceries down. My hand stayed on the counter longer than it needed to. I thought about saying something firm, something clear. Instead, nothing came out. I nodded. That small movement felt harmless at the time. It wasn't. She kept talking faster now, like she'd already won. I listened. Or maybe I didn't. My head was loud. My chest felt tight. I remember thinking I'd deal with it later. That later always comes with interest. Honestly, if you're listening and thinking, just say no, yeah, I hear you. I think about that moment more than I should. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, 71 years old. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. It is inspired by real situations, real emotions, and real choices people make when respect quietly disappears. Different story, different message. This one just happens to start with a missing key. I stood there a few seconds longer, breathing in someone else's cologne, telling myself I was being dramatic. Then I carried the groceries to the kitchen like everything was normal. How can someone take up space without raising their voice? I met Ethan properly that night. Not a handshake moment. More like a collision. He was already there when I came back from the bedroom, shoes off, feet planted on my living room rug like they'd grown there. He dropped into my couch and didn't adjust. Didn't ask if that seat was okay. The cushions dipped and stayed that way. My daughter hovered near him, half smiling. Nervous energy. I recognized it. I'd worn that face myself years ago, back when I still tried to smooth things over before anyone noticed the rough edges. He leaned back and looked around. Took it in slow. This place has good bones. The couch creaked again as he shifted. Comfortable. Too comfortable. Another glance around like he was running numbers in his head. You could get a lot for this now. Market's still decent. She laughed. A quick sound. Too quick. Like she was agreeing before checking with herself. I stayed standing. Didn't sit. My hand rested on the back of a chair, fingers gripping harder than necessary. I hated that I noticed how relaxed he was, hated it more that I didn't shut it down. He's staying. How long? The words came out flatter than I expected. Not angry, just trying to anchor something. She shrugged. Small movement. Casual. We'll see. That was it. No timeline, no check-in. Just a floating answer that landed somewhere between permanent and none of my business. He kept talking. Renovations, layout, what we could do with the place. Future tense. Always future. I nodded once without meaning to. My body doing things my mouth refused to do. You ever feel like a guest in your own house? That was new for me. The couch, the rug, the air between us, it all felt claimed, not loudly, just assumed. I finally sat careful, not to disturb the cushions he'd already claimed. The couch made a small sound under his weight, like it was adjusting to him. I stared at that spot, longer than necessary, telling myself I'd speak up next time. Next time always sounds reasonable in the moment. When did language start rewriting my life? It slipped out of her mouth like it had always been true. We were standing in the kitchen, not even arguing, just talking around each other. Our house could use new cabinets. I didn't react right away. I waited. Sometimes if you wait, people correct themselves. She didn't. I cleared my throat. Quiet. Careful. It's my house. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't stiffen. I even smiled a little, like this was a misunderstanding we'd laugh about later. She smiled back. The kind of smile you give a child who insists the sky is green. You don't need to worry anymore. That landed wrong. Heavy. Like she'd already decided something without me. I wasn't. The words came out sharper than I meant. She noticed. Her jaw tightened just for a second. Then it was gone. I raised her alone after her father died. No manual. No backup. I did what I thought love looked like. I kept doors open. I didn't lock things down. Somewhere along the way, access became expectation. I can see that now. I could probably see it then too. I just didn't want to. She started talking about changes. Small ones, she said. Cabinets. Paint. Making the place feel fresh. Ethan nodded from the doorway, arms crossed like this was already a group decision. I focused on the counter so I wouldn't look at him. On the shelf behind her, my wedding photo was face down. I don't know when that happened. I didn't ask. Asking would have made it real. She kept using that word. Our. Each time a little firmer. Each time I said less. I told myself I didn't want conflict at my age. That I'd earned peace. Another excuse. Another stupid decision dressed up as wisdom. This is where most people would have drawn a line. I didn't. She spoke like the future was settled. I spoke like everything was temporary. Those are not equal positions. I felt it slipping. Not all at once. Just enough to know something had changed and it wasn't in my favor. What if the truth isn't hidden, just discussed without you? It was late. The house had settled into that quiet where every small sound feels louder than it should. I was walking past the kitchen when I heard my name. Not called out. Used. Slipped into a sentence like a detail already handled. I stopped in the doorway. Didn't mean to. My body did it before my brain caught up. Her voice was low. Careful. The tone she uses when she wants something done cleanly. Once Mom signs, it's done. A pause. Listening. She gets confused sometimes. Another pause. Longer this time. Yeah, a facility. Just in case. My hands started shaking. Not dramatic shaking. Small. Enough that I noticed. Enough that I pressed them together to make it stop. I didn't walk in. I didn't announce myself. I stood there half hidden like I was the one doing something wrong. We just needed on paper. That sentence landed differently. Practical. Final. Like the rest was already agreed on. The refrigerator hummed beside me louder than usual. Or maybe I'd just never noticed it before. The sound crawled under my skin. I backed away slowly, careful not to make the floor creak. In the bathroom, I closed the door and sat on the edge of the tub. Then I slid down until I was sitting inside, it fully dressed, knees pulled in. I hadn't done that in years. Not since my husband died. Not since I thought I was past that kind of fear. I didn't cry. That surprised me. My chest felt tight, but my head felt clear in a way it hadn't before. Like something had clicked into place. That word facility does something to you. Even if you're fine, even if you're sharp, it turns you into a problem that needs managing. When I stood up, my legs felt steady. The shaking was gone. Whatever softness I'd been operating on drained out of me quietly. I flushed the toilet even though I hadn't used it, washed my hands, dried them carefully. By the time I stepped back into the hallway, the house felt different, not hostile, calculated. I didn't confront her that night, not because I was scared, because now I was paying attention. What scares people more than anger, I didn't argue. That was the part they didn't know how to handle. My daughter kept circling back, voice getting tighter each time, little jabs wrapped in concern, asking if I was tired, if I was feeling overwhelmed, if maybe decisions were harder for me lately. She watched my face closely, like she was waiting for something to slip. Ethan filled the space I didn't. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like this was a meeting. Started talking about timing, about how things worked now, about how banks liked things clean, titles clear, paperwork done before anything unexpected happened. I held my coffee and let it sit. Steam gone. Bitter smell rising. I didn't drink it. "Why are you being so quiet?" She tilted her head when she said it. Soft, almost kind, thinking. One word. Flat. I didn't explain what about. Didn't owe them that. They exchanged a look. Quick. Satisfied. I recognized it immediately. The look people get when they think they've figured you out. When they think silence means exhaustion. Or confusion. Or consent. Ethan kept going. Talked about loans like they were favors. About how smart it would be to move quickly. How lucky I was to have options. He used words like secure and best for everyone. He never once said my name. I nodded once. Not agreement. Just acknowledgement. He mistook it anyway. I know this sounds passive. It wasn't. It was calculated, messy, but calculated. Every word I didn't say stayed with me. Every assumption they made gave me more room. My coffee was cold by the time they finished laying out my future. I set the mug down carefully. Too carefully. My hand didn't shake. They thought they were winning, that I was easing out of the way. That age had finally done what pressure couldn't. I let them believe it. That night after they went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table. No notes, no lists. Just the quiet and a decision forming slow and solid. By morning, I knew exactly who I needed to call. What decisions can't be undone once they start? I pulled the deed out of the file drawer that morning. Not dramatic, not ceremonial, just paper. My name sat there alone, clean and undeniable. I stared at it longer than necessary, like it might rearrange itself if I blinked. It didn't. The phone felt heavier than it should have. I dialed, stopped, stared at the screen, then hit call before I could talk myself out of it. A woman answered. Calm voice. Professional. I gave her my address. There was a pause on the other end, the kind where someone is picturing numbers. I'd like to talk about selling. Silence. Not awkward. Assessing. You're the sole owner. Yes. Another pause. Are you sure? My throat tightened. My voice cracked anyway. I hated that part. Yes. She didn't comment on the crack. Didn't rush me. Just moved forward like this was a normal Tuesday. Asked when I could meet. What timeline I wanted. Fast, I said. Clean. I didn't tell my daughter. I didn't hint. I didn't give anyone a chance to interrupt or negotiate or perform concern. That felt important. I wasn't asking permission. I wasn't explaining. At the kitchen table, I signed preliminary paperwork while the house was quiet. The pen scratched louder than it should have. I pressed harder than necessary, like the ink needed convincing. Halfway through, my hand hovered. Just for a second. Long enough to picture her face when she found out. Long enough to wonder if this was too much. Too final. I finished signing. This is where you might think I felt strong. I didn't. I felt sick. Not regret sick. More like motion sick. Like the ground had shifted and my body hadn't caught up yet. The realtor explained next steps. Showings, photos, discretion. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Wrote dates on a scrap of paper and slid it into my pocket instead of leaving it on the counter. When the call ended, the kitchen sounded empty in a way it hadn't before. Not sad, just quiet. I gathered the papers, tucked them back into the drawer, and closed it carefully. Upstairs, I could hear them moving around, starting their day like nothing had changed. Something had. They just didn't know it yet. What do people assume will still be there when they return? They left early Friday morning. Suitcases by the door, keys jingling. My daughter kissed my cheek like this was any other weekend. Ethan called out that they'd be back Sunday night. Casual, confident, like nothing in the house needed watching. I stood in the doorway and waved. I didn't remind them to lock up. I didn't say drive safe. I closed the door after them and leaned my forehead against it for a second longer than necessary. Then I started packing. Not everything, just what mattered. Papers first, birth certificate, deed copies, insurance. The folder I'd kept since my husband died, the one I told myself I'd never need again. Photos went next. Not all of them, just a handful. The rest could stay. They belonged to the house more than they belonged to me. I didn't clean. That surprised me. I didn't straighten pillows or wipe counters or make the place easier for whoever came next. I let the house look lived in. Let it show wear. That felt honest. I cried over stupid things. A pair of socks I'd kept because he used to wear them around the house. A chipped mug I hated but never threw away. I sat on the edge of the bed and laughed at myself for that part. Of all things. I didn't cry over my daughter, not yet. That hurt sat deeper, quieter. The zipper on my suitcase sounded too loud in the room. Sharp, final. I zipped it slowly, like rushing would make it worse. It didn't. Leaving without a fight feels wrong. Every instinct tells you to explain, to defend yourself, to demand acknowledgement. I didn't do any of that. I took the suitcase to the car and didn't look back at the house. Not because I was brave, because if I did, I might stop. That night I slept somewhere else. Cheap place. Clean enough. The bed felt unfamiliar under me. I stared at the ceiling and listened to traffic I didn't recognize. By Saturday morning, the realtor called. Buyers were interested. Serious. Timeline fast. I told her to keep moving. What happens when expectation hits a locked door? I wasn't there when they came back. That part matters. I know because my phone started vibrating before I even finished my coffee. Missed calls stacking up. My daughter first, then Ethan, then my daughter again. No messages at first, just noise. Panic without words. I didn't answer. The realtor called instead. Calm, almost gentle. She told me they'd arrived while the buyer was inside walking through with a contractor. Timing nobody could have planned better if they tried. Your daughter said it was her house. I could hear the pause in her voice. The professional distance cracking just a bit. The buyer didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She had papers in her hand. Signed. Recorded. Final. Not anymore. That was it. No speech. No explanation. Just fact. Apparently, Ethan swore. Loud. The kind of swearing that's meant to scare people back into their place. It didn't work. He demanded to know where I was. The buyer told him that wasn't her problem. By the time the fists hit the door, the locks had already been changed. Dull thuds. Frustration without leverage. The realtor said it wasn't violent, just desperate. Like knocking harder might reverse time. My phone buzzed again. A text, this time. What did you do? I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because I didn't know how to answer, because any answer would turn into a fight, and the fight was already over. Another message came through. You can't do this to us. Us. That word again. Still trying to claim space that didn't exist anymore. I turned the phone face down on the table. The room was quiet. Neutral. Temporary. Exactly what I needed. I didn't watch it unfold. I didn't stand across the street or listen from the car. That was intentional. This wasn't about seeing them lose. It was about being gone before they could reach for me. Paperwork doesn't argue. Locks don't negotiate. Ownership doesn't care who feels entitled. Later that night, the realtor sent a short message. It's done. I believed her. Is silence cruelty or self-defense? The calls didn't stop. They changed shape. At first, it was confusion. Short messages. Missed calls back to back. My name filling the screen like a warning. Then the tone shifted. How could you do this to me? That one came through while I was sitting on the edge of a cheap motel bed, shoes still on suitcase unopened. I stared at the wall instead of the phone. Let it buzz itself quiet. You're my mother. That one hit lower. Cleaner. No yelling. Just wait. The kind meant to pull you back into place. I picked the phone up. My thumb hovered. I swear I almost answered. Not to argue. Not to explain. Just to hear her voice and make sure she was breathing. Old habits don't die fast. They just go quiet and wait. The phone vibrated again against the nightstand. Thin wood. Cheap lamp rattling with it. That stupid sound pushed me over the edge. I turned it face down. The messages kept coming. Apologies slipped in between accusations. She said she hadn't meant it like that. Said I misunderstood. Said Ethan pushed too hard. Then 5 minutes later, I was selfish. Then cruel. Then sick. The words escalated when silence didn't work. You ruined everything. I didn't respond. By midnight, the anger burned itself out and turned pleading. Voice messages this time. Her voice shaking. Saying she didn't know where they'd go. That they had plans. That I was supposed to be part of them. Supposed to be. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The room smelled like cleaner and old carpet. Nothing familiar. Nothing mine. That felt intentional too. If you've ever gone no contact, you know how loud the quiet is. It presses in. It argues for them. It reminds you of every version of yourself that would have answered before. I didn't block her. Not yet. I let it ring. Let it buzz. Let it sit unanswered until the battery dipped low enough to force a break. By morning, the messages slowed. Not stopped. Just spaced out. Like someone pacing themselves for a longer fight. I packed my bag properly this time. Folded clothes. Lined up documents. Plugged the phone in without checking it. Somewhere between the silence and the resolve, something settled. I wasn't punishing her. I was choosing not to bleed anymore. What does winning look like when it feels lonely? I'm somewhere new now. Not permanent. Just mine for the moment. Different walls. Different sounds. Traffic outside the window instead of footsteps in the hallway. At night, that noise tells me I'm not waiting for anyone to come home. The realtor called earlier in the week. Papers finalized. Funds transferred. She congratulated me like this was a milestone birthday or a promotion. I thanked her and ended the call before she could fill the silence with cheer. My daughter hasn't called again. One last message came through days ago. Short, controlled. Said she didn't recognize me anymore. I stared at it for a long time. She was right. I don't recognize that version either. I didn't fix anything. That's the part people struggle with. There was no speech. No confrontation where everyone learned something. No moment where she apologized and I forgave her and we hugged in the driveway. Life doesn't wrap itself up like that. I just removed myself. That was the choice. Quiet. Irreversible. Not brave. Not clean. Necessary. Someone once told me endurance was love. That if you stayed long enough, took enough, explained yourself enough, it would turn into safety. I believed that for decades. It nearly cost me everything that was still mine. Here's the thing. I wish someone had told me earlier. Boundaries don't require permission. And walking away doesn't mean you stopped loving someone. Sometimes it means you finally loved yourself enough to stop disappearing. I still don't know if my daughter will ever forgive me. I don't know what our relationship looks like from here or if there even is one. I sit with that uncertainty every day. It's heavy, but it's honest. If you're listening and this feels uncomfortably familiar, talk about it. Say it out loud. Share your story in the comments. Not because I have answers, but because silence is how these situations survive. I didn't lose my daughter. I lost the version of myself who thought love meant endurance. And tonight, as the unfamiliar traffic hums outside my window, I can breathe.